And we are live. Hello and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports for today's Rugby World Cup daily news show. And we are officially into week 2 of the Rugby World Cup. And what a week 1 it was. A lot of interesting results. No real upsets, to be honest. So still waiting for that first sort of massive, game. There's always that one game which is like iconic in terms of the upset that happens, stuff like that. So we didn't really have that in that first week, but so maybe we have to wait for the second week. But a couple of very interesting games, as well as some very good performances, and a couple of question marks being raised about some teams, a couple of answers being or questions being answered really by others. So it was an interesting first week, and I think that overall, if you look at the pools and stuff like that, no massive surprises just yet. But I think the main thing is looking at certain teams, and some, I think some teams there are some worries, and some teams are very much put to bed a bit of doubts, or at least sort of given people a bit of a reason for a bit of hope and a bit more sort of optimism maybe going into the second week. I think the likes of England, Australia, for example, two teams where people were very iffy about coming into tournaments, both of them getting very important wins over the weekend. Australia, getting that bonus point win. England, really sort of pretty easily in the end, overcoming Argentina. It was a very disappointing performance from Argentina, if we must be brutally honest. Was very much expecting a bit more from Michael Cheika's men. So so basically in the next sort of half an hour, we're going to talk about some of the news that is floating around. We do have confirmation, by the way, that the Springbok team will be announced tomorrow, so we will be live for that as well. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Jesse Kriel incident, which everybody's talking about at the moment. We'll be talking a little bit about the potential planned strikes that are happening in France. We'll give you a couple of updates and just sort of talk a little bit about the weekend and what was interesting and sort of a bit of repercussions going into week 2. So if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, please do put them into the comments. Let me know what you guys thought about the first weekend and what your thoughts are going into this week. And in terms of our Forever Sports tour, this is your third last news show from Johannesburg. And from Friday, this show will actually be being broadcast to you directly from France. When you do see me, I will be in France. So we'll hopefully try and take you to a couple of different locations, maybe a couple of coffee shops, maybe something with a bit of a view. That should be quite a cool little difference. It's something a bit different to what we usually do on the channel as well, which is very exciting. So let's get into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is the whole Jesse Kriel incident, because there's a lot of been talk about it. Obviously, Gregor Townsend addressed it in his post-match conference and sort of said that they've been worried about the inconsistencies where Tom Curry was red carded the night before due to head-on-head contact, and then they're saying that there was head-on-head contact from Jesse Kriel on that Jack Dempsey tackle, and nothing was done. I think a lot of South African fans were also querying the Finn Russell, for example, incident. And it's interesting, in terms of you seeing what you want to see, because Rassie Erasmus come out and said there was no head contact with Jesse Kriel, and Gregor Townsend saying that there obviously was. And I think, Scotland Gregor Townsend and Scotland were basically saying that Finn Russell penalty shouldn't have even been a penalty. He was kind of just pulling out of a tackle, or trying to catch the ball. And, that there wasn't really a tackle, that there was no head contact, and that shouldn't have been a penalty. I think South African fans will be saying that could have been a yellow card. So it's an interesting. It's always going to be interesting from that perspective with regards to what different people think, and you're always going to be a little bit, biased towards your team, aren't you? And sort of selectively blind at times. But let's talk about it. So in terms of the head contact, we've all obviously seen the photos and stuff like that, and maybe I can actually put it on the screen as well. Let me see if I can get that sorted. That's a good idea. I'm going to put that on the screen now, and also the problem is, though, when it comes to something like a very select sort of screenshot, is it doesn't always tell us with the full story and stuff like that. And so I'm going to show you exactly what everyone is saying was the issue, and then we can talk a little bit about it. Okay, so this is the freeze frame that has been going around, and yeah, as you can see over there, and again, I was trying to find the video. We can't show the video, unfortunately, because it'll be taken down. But so that's the freeze frame that's now sort of going around. And over there, it looks like there's sort of head contact. Obviously, sort of, we don't sort of know the extent because it said a freeze frame doesn't always tell the clearest of pictures and stuff. So that is what's going around. That's what everybody has been complaining about, saying that where the inconsistencies. Now, Rasmus came out and point blank said there was no head contact. And in terms of the sighting, we're sitting here on Tuesday. The incident happened on Sunday evening, and there's been no sighting. Tom Curry was cited immediately. Well, obviously got a red card, and his citing commission was actually, I think, supposed to be today, I believe it was. I can just go in the World Rugby. So there has been no sightings. He will not be cited. I think that is the main thing. So a lot of people have been asking me, saying, will he be cited? Can he be cited? Obviously, he can be cited. So people are asking, even if he didn't get a red card or wasn't picked up, can he still be cited? Now, yes, he can. He can still be cited. That's definitely still a thing. But the fact that he hasn't by now means that he won't. I think is the good news, I suppose, from a staffing perspective, that he will not be cited. I'm going to the disciplinaries. So if you go to the disciplinaries, for example, there's only one and from the weekend, that is Tom Curry. And that I said, I think that will be on today, if I'm not mistaken. The hearing will take place on Tuesday evening. Yeah, Tuesday evening. So Tom Curry hearing will be tonight. And so we'll put a video out as soon as we have that verdict, because it will be the first potential ban of the tournament. And I think the biggest problem is, I think if you look at this video incident again, you can look at a freeze frame over here and you can say it looks bad. If you look at the video, for example, I don't think it's necessarily head-on-head contact initially. I think it's a difficult one at the end of the day, and you can sort of slow it down, look from different angles. I don't think it's as clear-cut as everybody sort of is suggesting. And again, we're now sitting 2 days on from it. Nothing's been brought up, so he's not going to get cited for it. So Springbok fans, don't think we need to panic. But then obviously the sort of big questions are the inconsistencies. And there's always going to be a lot of debate around this with regards to what counts as head-on-head contact. Because we were talking a little bit about the Tom Curry incident, and some people saying that they felt it was very harsh, some people saying, well, it's head-on-head contact. And I think by the letter of the law, it was a red card. It was head-on-head contact. There was the problem is you look at mitigation. Now, the mitigation, I suppose, some people's argument is that Jean-Cruz Malia was coming down and sort of and wasn't on the ground yet, so he wouldn't have known exactly how high he was going to be, because he was kind of falling down from the tackle, not falling down from the tackle. He got up, the ball had come down, and so that's where some people are saying it could have been mitigation, because but at the same time, and somebody made this point on our group WhatsApp group, they were saying that there was another tackler at the same time who was lower, who wasn't in the position for head-on-head contact, and so by looking at that, you're going to sit there saying, well, it could have been avoided. And the usual thing is when there's head-on-head contact, they start at a red card threshold, and then they look at mitigation, and they work their way down. So in that instance, for example, they said, right, there's head-on-head contact between Tom Curry and Malia. It is with a higher degree of force. What are the mitigating factors? Now, Tom Curry goes into the tackle very upright, never really sort of looks to drop, leading with his head, for example. And whilst it's an unfortunate incident, there were no real steps that he took to prevent it. And that's the problem. You look at mitigating factors and there wasn't any, which is why he was red carded and why he will now be facing a disciplinary hearing this evening. So two very different incidents, if you ask me. Immortal say, I think they already said he won't be cited. Tim Van Berg says, hi Stevie, just got back from Marseille. Not a bad start for the World Cup. Oh, fantastic. Good to hear. Very cool that you were over there. And so we go on Thursday. So very, very excited to go there. And we'll be in Bordeaux this weekend for SA versus Ireland. So this Sunday during the watch along, which will be with the Wares, we'll hopefully be doing a live crossing, the first ever live crossing on Free Sports, and it's going to be to France to Bordeaux. So hopefully you can get that right, because it'll be very cool to do. Tim Berg says, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been 36 hours since the game, which means yes, you can't be cited anymore, right? As far as I understand, yes, that is the case. If he was going to be cited, it would have happened already. And no, I cannot be streaming the game for us in the stadium, unfortunately. Evan says, saw the replay from another angle, looked like no head contact, shoulder hit the ball into his chin. And says, I think he could only be cited if it was a red card. I think it was just an awkward tackle there, and it does raise eyebrows. No, you can be cited. So, for example, obviously, that incident against Jean-Cruz Malia, back in Ellis Park where he jumped into to Grant Williams. It wasn't even a penalty. There was absolutely nothing. And he was then cited retrospectively afterwards and was banned. So just because there was no card or just because there was no penalty or anything like that, it doesn't mean that you can't be cited. You can be cited, and people have been, but in this particular case, it doesn't look like they have cited him. Even says tackle techniques need to be corrected to avoid the risk. Well, that's I think the big thing, and that's what people are, and that's what I was saying about England is the problem with England is that they're dealing with a lot of red cards in a short space of time, and you start to get a little bit of a reputation about your tackle technique if that is the case. And so, referees and TMOs are always going to be trying to be neutral and trying to treat every single situation on its own merits. But there's always going to be sort of a subconscious amount of, well, these guys have been getting red cards quite a lot. They've been guilty of really poor tackle technique, and that's where I think the England coaching team needs to be taking a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of the blame, but they need to be having a review because they've had so many red cards in the last few months that there's obviously a fundamental problem with the way that they're approaching the game defensively, and that needs to change because that's the whole point of these red cards. Somebody made a very good point over the weekend, and they were saying that, you remember how, spear tackles was such a big thing 10, 15 years ago. And they then started saying, right, so spear tackles are completely taken out. If you dump it on the head, it's a yellow card, red card territory, for example. And it took a few years, and we had a lot of cards, stuff like that. And they made a good point saying, how often do we see spear tackles now? And we actually don't. So yes, there are the occasional times where a player is lifted up and he's dumped, but we do see it. It's far fewer incidents than there were 10 years ago, maybe. So there's no doubt that it works, and that's the whole point. And this is the thing, we can criticize World Rugby, we can criticize the officials for how many cards there are and stuff, but the whole point is to try and change players' behavior, players' tackle technique, and to change the way the game is played to make it safer. And when people sit there and say rugby's gone soft, I think that is incredibly dismissive and very, very just wrong, to be honest. Rugby is more physical and more intense than it ever has been. And it's far more professional. The players are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they hit harder, they tackle harder. So rugby has never been as physical as it is currently now. So when you sit there saying, oh, the game's gone soft because they're trying to ensure that, people who are being tackled harder than ever are not being tackled in the head and then, developing dementia later and dying and forgetting their family names. That's what they're trying to prevent. We're trying to get away from the head injuries. We're trying to reduce the risk and make the game as safe as possible, whilst keeping the core principles there. That is the point, and it has to be done. Otherwise, the game will not survive. You cannot have a game or a sport which is, functionally too dangerous. You've got to weigh up the risk, and there will always be a risk of injury. It is a contact sport, but a contact sport doesn't mean that people need to be getting concussions every single week and long-lasting head injuries. That's what we're trying to get away from. So yes, a broken bone, concussions will be part of it. Concussions are part of every sport. In the last Proteas game, or the first Proteas game in the cricket, for example, there was concussion for being hit in the head, and there was some substitution. So concussions are always going to be part of the game, but we've got to try and find ways to reduce it so that they are isolated incidents and not the norm, and that's what they're trying to do. So I don't have an issue with the fact that they're trying to do. The issue obviously is the inconsistencies, and again, I think that's going to be a year or two of trying to clarify the rules and trying to really sort of work it all out, and then hopefully after that, it then becomes a case of the tackle techniques all adjust accordingly, and we're sitting here in 4 or 5 years' time saying, how cool is it that there are so few head injuries? That the tackling's all got a bit lower, and that hopefully the game is in a much better place because of it. So you do have to walk before you can run. And yes, so there has been an increase in cards and stuff like that. Again, I think we're talking about long-term vision here, people, long-term vision. So I don't mind. I'm not going to spend my time getting so worked up by all the cards. I've also never been one of those people who think that a red card ruins the game. I think a red card is part of the game. And I think that if you start to reduce the impact of the red card or the consequences of it, I think you're kind of losing the point. Isn't the whole point to take a hard line? And if you don't take a hard line, then you're not going to be changing players' attitudes. You're not going to be changing the way the game is played as quickly as you'd like it to be. Brendan says, if they cite this accidental incident but let Finn's clear foul play, it'll be an injustice. Winter Pistol says, if Farrell gets away with his tackle, Jesse gets away with it too, while Farrell is currently serving a ban. We're just saying, seeing the bunker system being misused the way it has, it's like watching a field being plowed by Ferrari. So good in principle, so badly operated by those in charge. I don't think the bunker's been terrible. TMO and the bunker's obviously quite different. So if you've got an issue with the way TMO is being used, for example, then that's one thing. But the bunker, I've yet to really see the bunker being that misused. I've quite enjoyed the bunker concept. Different TMO, different set of eyes, different sort of team and stuff like that. Look, to be fair, also it is very new. You know, they weren't, and I think before a month ago they weren't even planning on using it in the World Cup. So it was only trialed really in the last month or two, and then implemented for the World Cup. So I think it's always gonna have a couple of teething issues, but I'm a big fan of the concept. So hopefully with the small issues they have, they can sort of fix that quite quickly. It has been a very tumultuous time for World Rugby in the last weekend. This first weekend, there were transport issues in Marseille. There's a transport strike planned in France on Friday, which is the day we arrive. So we might be arriving to a transport strike. So that's just been phenomenal. Hopefully I can get onto my train before then. And I can get to Bordeaux, because once I'm in Bordeaux, I don't really care what they do. But I'll be so upset if I get to bloody Paris and there's no train going to Bordeaux and I'm be stuck in Paris, wondering how I'm going to get there. So that's going to be fun. And Papa Rumble says, have we had updates on Airburn? Last I saw, they said 10 days or so. But we're still waiting on scan results. Yeah, there's been no official updates since then. And yeah, so that was a press conference yesterday. Rassi Rasmus saying that he's going to be out for 7 to 10 days. Was never going to play the Romania game. But yeah, was still needs to be able to train and stuff like that. And he's not going to be able to for the next sort of week or bit. But in theory, should be okay for Ireland as long as he's trained well and there are no complications. That is the last update we got. Dion says, question, is Dan Bigger shouting at his hook and other teammates generally considered to be okay? I was shocked by the instance, didn't even get much press. I suppose you have to ask the teammates stuff like that. I don't know, it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? You get some people who are very vocal at their teammates and stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a bit. I suppose it's about the line. I suppose it's sort of the amount of respect that you either have or that you give your teammates, stuff like that. So if you're in a position and that's you've been given the license to be able to do that, and people can understand where you're coming from, then it can work. But obviously, there's always needs to be a line. So as long as it has a net positive result, I suppose it can work. I've never been a massive fan of it. I think it's one thing demanding things of a few players and stuff. I think it's another thing shouting at people when they do something wrong. So yeah, I think there's limits to it. Who do we face in the quarters if we lose to Ireland? We have to find out. We have to wait. If we lose to Ireland, we finish second. We'll play the top of the group A, which at this stage will be France. So we have to wait and see what happens in that group. Anyone know when Billy will step down? He's never stepping down. Sian says, ref chat is mostly boring. What can be an interesting discussion on the laws and their application there, which turns into fans whinging about perceived injustices? 100%. I don't mind talking about laws. I don't mind discussing the implementation of laws. It's just very tiring when you go on to a forum or you're chatting to people and it's Fiji got robbed because of a biased ref. I find that chat so boring. Like really, honestly, rolling my eyes type. Like I'm just such a waste of my time to be talking about supposed biased referees and referees manipulating the game and match fixing and all the conspiracies. Officials always get things wrong. They always get things right. So there's always going to be a bit of grey area, and that's always going to be the case. And if you don't understand that, and if you don't mentally prepare yourself for that, you're going to be pretty miserable because that's just the reality. They are human. There's always going to be human error. And it's about making sure that we can try and reduce as much as possible, and that's where the laws come in, where we hopefully get laws which are as comprehensive and understandable as well as clear as possible, so that there is no ambiguity there. Bram says, you talk about they must change player behavior. That is a stupid plan. It's done lottery, whether it's a yellow, red, penalty, nothing. How will you ever change tackles like that? Ridiculous. No. That's the whole point. It's to say, if you run in upright and there's head-on-head collision, if you run in with your shoulder and there's head-on-head collision, you will get carded. That's what the laws are. That's the whole point. Don't run upright. You have to go low. If you're tackling somebody from below the chest and you've wrapped your arms, you've got no risk of being yellow carded. Zero risk. If you're tackling below here and you've wrapped your arms, then you can't get a card. But if you go up and you're looking at and you're making the hit above the chest, then your lottery in inverted commas comes down to the timing. So yes, if you get it right and you hit them in the chest and they go down, you're happy days. There's not much room here, is there? So you hit somebody here, for example, even sort of the neck area, you're in trouble. And that's why they want to take out this grey area, this chance of getting it wrong, and say, go there. Because if you're aiming for below the chest and you get it slightly wrong, you're there. But if you're aiming for here and you get it wrong and you're making contact here, that's where you're going to get into trouble. And that's what they're trying to change, is to get people's defaults and you know, people's initial tackle technique to go lower. So we are getting away from head-on-head contact. That is the whole point, and to get away from shoulder-to-head contact. So yeah, I don't think it is that much of a lottery. It's we're trying to get people to go lower. That's the plan, and therefore, if you go high, you run the risk of getting a yellow card and a red card. If you go low, you'll be fine. That's the concept. Martin says that the Kriel tackle was showed 5 times in the replay, then there was problems. Well, to be fair, the TMO looked at it. The TMO can look at everything. So I'm sure, and the fact that there was a replay on our TVs, for example, it means that the TMO would have seen it as well. But then decided not to take action. Winston says, how good was Grant Williams looking? Can't wait to see him really tearing up the field throughout the rest of the Rugby World Cup. Yeah, I mean, that ankle tap from Finn Russell was so important. Can we just talk about how good Finn Russell's defense was? I mean, we're talking about one of the best attacking fly halves in the world who put in an absolute exhibition in defense. I've never ever seen him defend that well. He was absolutely everywhere. I mean, I think he made about 8 or 9 tackles, but like last man tackles, covering tackles, ankle taps. I mean, he's an absolute demon on defense. He's just the most complete fly half out there, isn't he? You know, I think that's just the main thing we need to start talking about. Mana saying big screen replays influence the crowd, with the crowd also involved. Evan says Williams looks deadly attacked, just wish he chipped and chased. Needs to learn to solo support, will never catch up. Yeah, that's the problem when he's the quickest player on the field. The poor guys are like desperately trying to chase him, and he's just leaving them in their wake. So, yeah, look again. If it wasn't for the ankle tap, I think he could have gone all the way. It was a great tackle from Finn Russell. It was a great run from Grant Williams. But I actually don't think we're giving enough respect to how good that ankle tap was, because if he hadn't made that, it was try time. But yeah, I mean, he's just so exciting, isn't he? He gets half a space, and once he's in a bit of space, one-on-one, you're going to back him, aren't you? Because he's got that devastating pace. He's rounding wings. You know, that's the thing. He's leaving any backline player in his wake. He's the quickest player in the squad, I reckon. At the very least, with from an acceleration point, and that's Kruma's Reinhardt, who's absolutely rapid. You've got Kirtley, Oren, Sanchez, and Colby, who are absolutely rapid. Jesse Kriel is not slow by any means, and they've all said that Grant Williams is just a different gravy when it comes to his sort of just acceleration and top speed. Absolutely mental how fast he is. My cousin says, looks like Bordeaux weather may be cool start out into the weekend, even possibility of afternoon showers on Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really plan on sitting and watching rugby in the rain on Sunday. I'm a little bit disappointed in that. The weather-wise, it doesn't look like it's going to be that cool. It does. Well, it's going to be like sort of mid to late 20s from what I've seen. We'll actually be able to do underground updates. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend from a weather perspective. Hopefully we get some dry weather, because I think against Romania, obviously Ireland put 80 on them, and we'd like to do something similar. Very interested to see the team. By the way, my team prediction video will come out later today, and then we will have final confirmation of that team tomorrow evening when the team is announced. But yeah, in terms of other news, what do I want to talk about? Where are my articles here? So I saw a whole thing that there's an algorithm which has worked out who will win the World Cup. whole statistical thing. And it has actually said that even despite last week Friday, New Zealand has a 33.5% chance of winning its fourth World Cup. The next most likely champions are South Africa, followed by France, and then Ireland. So I think that was actually before this weekend, though. So I don't know how much it would be cool to see if they can change. If that changes because of the first weekend results, and whether that sort of still then obviously has the same sort of favorites and stuff. Problem with statistical analysis and stuff is that it just doesn't take into consideration the human element. There's always and how players can change in the day, scorelines change in the day, and how one small moment which you can't predict, a red card for example, a yellow card, an officiating error, a knock on or whatever can obviously be so influential in all these games. So yeah, you can always create a statistic, but there's always going to be that human element. If you get it wrong. Mario says, my favorite part of the weekend, other than the box winning, were at memes about Rusty's light system. What are the odds? They mean next to nothing, and I'm just there to mess with analysts. Yeah, I mean, the only time we really saw the lights, we seemed to see a red light, and it was basically, well, we assumed it may kind of go for polls, but I mean, they could definitely relay that message without the light. So, yeah, maybe it is a bit of just a bit of fun that they're having. Who do you think starts 10 this weekend? Will Money be rested? I think Money plays every single minute of the World Cup. I think that they need to build confidence into him. I think he needs to kick as many conversions and penalties and get his hands on the ball as much as possible. I don't think they would rest him at all. They could start David Williams at 10. I don't think so. I don't see why you would, to be honest. Maybe I'd rest Money against Tonga if we got there. But as I said, for somebody who's so new into his international career, I'll be playing him as much as possible. You also don't necessarily need to have to rest certain players as much as others. Like Stephen Kitsop, when your props, for example, I'd like to be resting those and some of your forwards. So I don't think he could play every minute of the tournament if he needed to, and I think he'd be okay. So yeah. Bram says, no, you get a risk of getting concussion of your own if you go for the hip. That is why you aim for the chest, which goes up if done wrong, and you cannot go for legs in that split second. No, well, that's the whole point. You have to get away from people going from the chest. That's literally the point, because you run the risk of then clotheslining people. We all played rugby. People all at tackle school. There's always certain things and tackle techniques. Sometimes people get it wrong, but we cannot be advocating for people to be hitting chest high tackles, because that is going to see people, head on head contact, shoulder to head contact. And that's the whole point. There were plenty of examples this weekend of very good tackles which weren't chest high and were around the waist and stuff. So that is, we're getting away from the sort of tackles. That's kind of the entire point of it. Josh says, don't you feel Ireland are very underrated at the moment? I don't really understand where that's coming from. Hey, the fact that everyone's just sort of writing them off. I mean, they looked a bit sloppy for the first about 10 minutes on Saturday, and then kicked into gear and obviously put Romania to bed. And it's Romania, so it's difficult to sort of see what that really means for Ireland. They play against Tonga this weekend. I think it's on Saturday at 9 o'clock. So that'll be a little bit, probably get a bit of a better idea of where they are. I'll be with you for that watch along, by the way. So hopefully that will give us a better idea of exactly where Ireland are within their form and stuff like that and temperament. At the end of the day, I expect Ireland to get through to the quarters very, very easily. And then it's about the monkey on the back, isn't it? Then it's about they've never gone past the quarters. Then it's about that whole mental, block of not being able to get into a semi-final. So it starts to come into play. So they're not an issue, and I think they'll very much know that they expect to breeze through to the quarters, and I'm sure they will. It's where they can pitch up for that quarterfinal and get the win over in New Zealand and France, which is not a small task. It wouldn't. I mean, and again, people will do it. Jeepers me, that's good. Just watching Quinton de Kock hitting a 6 down in Potchefstroom. People will say that they're choked. I don't think we can say that any of New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa, or France choked if they don't win the World Cup, because I think they're all four are very, very similar standards. I think it's about who pitches up on the day. If Ireland got to the final and lost to England, you could probably sit there and say, yeah, that's kind of a bit of a choke. They should never be losing to England in the final. And they shouldn't be. But I think when those four teams are going out to each other, I think it's about fair enough, to be honest. I think that they are that close with regards to the players, the ability, and stuff. So I don't think there's a lot of difference between those 4 teams. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, you got to beat who's in front of you, and that all comes sort of kicked into the quarters. But this weekend we've got some nice games. It's France versus Uruguay on Thursday. Cool to see Uruguay back in the mix. New Zealand versus Namibia on Friday. Samoa versus Chile on Saturday. Wales versus Portugal. Ireland versus Tonga. And then we've got some very nice games on Sunday with South Africa versus Romania, Australia versus Fiji, and England versus Japan. I'll be with you for 3 watch-alongs over the weekend, all coming from you live from Bordeaux, which is going to be fun. And we'll be doing live crossings and stuff on Sunday from Bordeaux at the SA versus Ireland, SA versus Romania game, which is going to be lots of fun as well. People are going to wrap up for the day there. In terms of videos to come, we've got 5 things learned between France and New Zealand coming out later. We've got a round 1 team of the week coming out. We've also got a predicted lineup video, which should all be coming out. So another 3 to 4 videos coming out today. Then tomorrow we'll be live for the team announcement. We'll be live for this show. We will also have a 5 things learned from South Africa versus Scotland. Yeah, some other cool content coming out then as well. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments and we'll try and answer them tomorrow, for example. I'll try and join us in the next live show. We'll be live tomorrow at 1 o'clock, as usual, for the daily news catch-up. And we'll see you guys then. Please do smash the like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And I will see you guys all very, very soon.